I'm Rick Geimer, as Karen mentioned. I'm the CTO of Lantana Consulting Group. My background is a old school Java developer, which you can probably tell because I'm a overweight middle-aged guy with a ponytail at a health IT conference. I did leave the Birkenstocks at home though, so I understand if it threw you off a little. My day job's the Lantana CTO. In HL7, I'm also the co-chair of the Structured Documents Working Group, active participant in the FHIR infrastructure working group, and also the lead on the CCD on FHIR project. I work for Lantana Consulting Group. We're a professional services company, consultants that basically provide software and standards development. We assist with implementation, provide terminology, data governance, assistance, and strategic planning. What I'll be talking about is briefly a little bit on the use cases around why you want to do FHIR profiling and localization, and then I'll talk about our FHIR profiling tool called Trifolia. I'll give a live demo of the tool, and then we'll just do a brief wrap-up. So one thing when you get into FHIR, especially if you've used other older HL7 specifications like CDA or version 3, is you find out very quickly that FHIR is readily usable out of the box. When you try to implement something like CDA out of the box, you look at it and let's say you want to try to represent something like an allergy, you find very quickly there's no allergy clinical statements in there. You have to take observation and then create all these complex relationships to things like medications for the substances and then reactions and all that. And it's very unintuitive, and you need a real in-depth knowledge of CDA and the RIM and all that to make it all work. FHIR, you've got an allergy intolerance resource. Out of the box, it's got everything, pretty much everything that you'll need. But that still doesn't mean that you wouldn't want to do some customizations on it. Let's say, for instance, you're in a country that's licensed SNOMED, so you want to bind your certain things to that coding system, or you want to do like labs to link problems to SNOMED and such. So binding to terminologies and value sets is a good thing to do with profiling. You might want to customize your resources for a specific use case. Given that allergy example before, let's say you want to, one of the things that's optional in there is the category of the allergy, whether it's a food one or a medication. It's optional in the base spec, but maybe for your use case, you want to make that required. So you can go in there and make things that are optional and required and such. Perhaps you've got a need to add extensions. FHIR has this 80-20 rule where you want to put 80% of what people need in there out of the box, and then if you have edge cases, you would use them with extensions. So let's say you're working on something like a care plan, but you're doing a nutritionist use case or a pharmacist use case. You might have some specific extensions that you need to add to that for things that are not in the base resources. And then lastly, once you've created your profiles, you can use those to test and validate instances to make sure that they conform to them and report errors if they do not. So it's good for certification and validation and just sanity checking, frankly. So there are a variety of ways to create FHIR profiles. In the FHIR build itself, you can use spreadsheets to create them. FHIR has a tool called Forge, which in fact I demonstrated at last year's FHIR application roundtable. That's very full-featured. But the reason why we went ahead and started adding profiling support to Trifolia, which previously was mainly a CDA templating tool, is because at the time when we were working on CCDA on FHIR, Forge was only supported FHIR DSTU2, and we wanted to be targeting the latest and greatest. So we looked at options there and decided, well, we actually have most of the stuff we need for profiling anything that has an XML schema, frankly, in Trifolia. So let's just go ahead and start building out FHIR support, which we did. So basically, Trifolia is an open source profiling and templating tool. It's an authoring tool and a repository. It is, like I said, open source. It's available on GitHub. You can have a single interface for doing CDA templating and FHIR profiling. It supports the most commonly used profiling tasks. It also supports multiple versions of FHIR out of the box. So you can do FHIR DSTU2 and FHIR STU3 using the same version of the tool. It's web-based, so you don't need to have a heavy desktop download for it. And one of the coolest features that I like is it exports a FHIR implementation guide publisher package, or a build package, I call it, as well as standalone web-based implementation guides if you just want to look at stuff directly online via Trifolia. And it's got FHIR API support for resources that are appropriate for talking about profiles and such. So links are there if you want to use the live tool directly without downloading or anything. you can go to our live site. If you wish to grab the source code and have your own local installation, you can do that as well from grab it from GitHub. So at this point, I'm going to drop out and go to our live demo. So here's Trifolia. And what you can do when you get in here after you log in with basically with OAuth. You can go in and browse and take a look at various implementation guides that are present. In this case, I've searched for CCDA, and I'm going to pick the CCDA on FHIR implementation guide. And I'm going to view the web-based IG for this particular one. So this is a Trifolia's way of showing you all the constraints and such in an implementation guide via the web. And this gives all the summary of CCDA on FHIR and references to the profiles that are in there and such. We can go back, we can look at the templates that are present in here. In this case, I'm going to take a look at the US Realm header, which is a profile on the composition resource, which is then used as a base profile for all the other composition resource profiles that are in the CCDA on FHIR implementation guide. You can go in here and it'll generate UML diagrams for you. If you want to see what other profiles are related to the US Realm header, and you can, if you want, click on these, and it will take you to those implementation or those profiles as well. In here, it'll show you all the cardinality constraints and such, and any value set bindings that are present. So this is a good way to sort of get a quick reference into what's available in a particular implementation guide or in a profile. Going back here, let me go back to home here. And actually right back on this. Next up, when you actually want to edit a particular profile, you can go here to the Browse Templates and Profiles, and I'm going to filter based on the CCDA on FHIR implementation guide, and this will show me just all the profiles that are present in here. If I scroll down oops, where is it here? I'll grab the US Realm header, and we can edit this. And when this comes up, it's got all the basic metadata information at the front, and then you can go to the actual constraints and start going editing the profile itself. So for instance, in the US Realm header here for CCDA on FHIR, encounter is optional, but if I wanted to, I can go ahead and click on this and make it required. And also, if we note here, there's an author where you can have one to many. Let's say that for my use case, I actually want to restrict it to a single author. I don't want to have multiples. I can do so very quickly. Also, Trifolia has the ability to import profiles or structure definition resources, actually as they are, from other tools, so in other projects. So there's a project called the US Core implementation guide where basically they've created a bunch of profiles to map the common clinical data set. And in here we've referenced the US Core practitioner profile, which we just imported the structure definitions, and then we're able to reference it and use directly. Now I'm going to cancel this because my co-chairs would get angry if I actually change the implementation guide on the live tool there. So one of the pieces that I really like about this tool is the ability to export a FHIR build package. So I'm going to go ahead and kick this off because it does take a little while. So when I select this, Trifolia exports a variety of formats, but the one I like, I'm going to be demonstrating here is the FHIR build package. Go yes and export. And why this is useful is because over the last year, FHIR abstracted implementation guide publishing from the core FHIR build. So there's a IG publisher, which is a Java application, but it requires data to be present in very specific folder structures. It requires the creation of a bunch of Jekyll templates and driver files to build a human readable documentation, and then it needs structure definition resources and value sets and to be named in a very certain way and to be present in the right directory structures. So it's when you do that manually, which I was originally doing, it can be a very time-consuming process and frankly a bit error-prone. So I quickly tapped my lead developer on their shoulder and said, "Hey, can we automate this?" So what we did was we created the ability to export a FHIR IG build package, and in here it's got all the the JSON driver file for your Jekyll templates. You can go in here and it's got all your structure definition resources for instance, the composition profiles and extensions. You've got value sets in there, the implementation guide resource. So it really builds everything that you need very quickly out of the box. And you know, you don't need to do a lot of work. You can just drag that you know, somewhere on your system, extract it from the zip file, and run the IG publisher directly, and get your implementation guide without a lot of extra work. If we go quickly here to the documentation, I want to show one last thing. So Trifolia does support the FHIR API for resources, again, that are appropriate for it. So on implementation guide, structure definition, value set, and such. Oh, and I just noticed an error because we changed conformance to capability statement. But I know the API is actually correct, but the documentation hasn't been updated yet. So that's basically it in a nutshell for the demo. Couple final notes on Trifolia. I do like to point out it's not as full-featured as other profiling tools like Forge. I like to think of Trifolia as actually trying to hit the 80-20 rule, the FHIR's 80-20. It's the most common profiling task that you need to do, especially if you're building document-based implementation guides. But you can import and export profiles and use them with other tools. So frankly, you know, I like to be able to drop out and, you know, go to Forge if I have something particularly tricky to do that Trifolia doesn't support, and then re-import it back in, and you can reference it and use it directly. Vice versa, if you want to use Trifolia to build a bunch of profiles quickly and then get them into Forge and keep them there, or upload them to Simplifier, you can do that as well. And as I mentioned, the API support is limited to profiling-related resources. It's not a full-fledged FHIR server, I would say. So basically, that's about it. Thank you very much, and we can move on to the next speaker.